Hello, and welcome once again to this edition of Newsmakers, The Road to Success, here on My Fox 8 Plus. I'm Neil McNeil. Now, if you're new to this platform, this is where I have extended conversations with people in our community who are not only making news or have made news, but they have done so very successfully. Now, over the next few minutes, you're going to watch the first part of my recent extended interview with Dr. Robert J. Brown, local philanthropist, entrepreneur, retired public relations specialist. I could go on and on. Dr. Brown is also well known for the company he's kept and the friends he's made over the years, from working with and developing a close personal relationship with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to working for President Richard Nixon in the White House, to becoming a key figure in getting South African President Nelson Mandela released from prison. Dr. Brown has been a world influencer on many different fronts, but it all started many years ago when he grew up very modestly in High Point, North Carolina, under the watchful eyes of a woman who would have a key influence on him. And this is where we start with Dr. Robert J. Brown in Newsmakers, The Road to Success. Hello and welcome once again to this edition of Newsmakers, The Road to Success. And it is a distinct honor for me to have as my guest today influencer, mentor, author, friend of presidents, friend of some of the most famous people in the world, Dr. Robert Brown. Dr. Brown, it is always good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
It has been a few years, and I got to say you're looking as good as ever.
Thank you.
You're looking good. What are you up to these days? I assume you're still very much in retirement, but you're still involved in a lot of things, correct?
Yeah, well, I attend some meetings in different parts of the country. I talk to somebody around the world every day, almost,
Right.
about some problem or some opportunity. And
So people still come and ask you questions and consult you and ask for your advice.
a lot of them do.
A lot of them do. Now, I understand you're still sitting on a few boards of High Point University. I believe you're still sitting
Yes,
on the board.
I've been on that board a long time.
And the Horatio Alger organization, I believe you're still very actively involved
with that.
Involved in that. I gotta tell you, I really struggled trying to figure out a title I could put under your name when I was doing this, because you've accomplished so much. And I decided to go with world-class power broker, because that's what the Washington Post called you at one time.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you ever sit back and wonder, wow, I've done a lot in my life. Does that ever cross your mind as to how much you have accomplished and how much of a wow factor that is?
Well, I'm so grateful that God has blessed me in so many ways. I think about all the places that I've been and all of the things that I've done all across the world, whether it be Russia, China, all over Africa, and everywhere.
Right.
And so I'm grateful. I'm just so grateful that God has given me that opportunity.
A lot of people describe you as one of the most accomplished individuals you know nothing about. But I get the feeling you kind of enjoy that description, kind of working behind the scenes, but yet making a difference. Am I in the ballpark there?
I think you're in the ballpark, because I've never tried to send out a lot of press releases about what I'm doing, and that's been my business,
Right?
To do press releases and all that.
I was going to
But I
say
never do that
you're a
about
public
myself.
relations executive. Yeah, you know all about press
Yes,
releases.
but I don't do that about anything that I've done ever, whether across the world or dealing with the leaders of the world and all that. I've never sent out one press release about it.
Yeah, I mean, and that is, it has been just an amazing life, which you detail in this wonderful autobiography. It is titled You can't go wrong doing right. And we'll talk about that title and where it came from. And I have started reading this book. I haven't completed it yet, but I highly recommend it. It is wonderfully written. And it so wonderfully describes a wonderful life. And we'll talk more about this. I got mine on Amazon, so you can still find it. So I believe it was published in 2019. Am I
Right,
correct?
something
Yeah.
like that. That's
Well,
right.
it is absolutely wonderful. You mentioned that you have traveled all over the world, but you grew up in High Point, North Carolina, in a community called Burns Hill. Talk to me about Burns Hill. What was it like growing up in Burns Hill?
Burns Hill is not too far away from this
This television station, yeah,
television station.
just a few miles.
Yeah, just right over the hill there. In fact, um, I used to pick blackberries. All I heard is there used to be a lot of blackberry fans out here.
That was well before Highway 29 and Interstate 85 was built, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, before
So
85.
they actually grew blackberries out here.
Oh yeah, the big field of berries, all kind of blackberries and dewberries and snakes.
Right. Right. I bet so. We still find a snake every now and then out in the
Oh,
parking
do
lot.
you?
So they haven't gone away. Uh,
Okay.
but you grew up in a family of very modest means.
Absolutely.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Just describe. You grew up in a family with your brother,
Mhm.
uh, and from what I understand, it was your grandmother who raised you. And we've got a picture of Miss Nellie Brown
That's her.
right here. And you know what strikes me about her is just how beautiful she was.
She
I mean,
was a
she was a striking figure.
she was a magnificent woman. Her father was a slave down
That's right.
in eastern North Carolina.
That's right. But
Yeah,
you considered her to be your mother. I mean, you called her mama.
that's
Am I
right.
correct?
She raised me.
She raised you,
That's
and
right.
I read in your book where you knew your biological mother,
That's
but
right.
she was very young, and she was really more like a sister, perhaps. Am
That's
I correct?
You're absolutely correct.
Right. What? Tell me about your grandmother, and again, why was she such a big influence to you?
Because I saw her from day one, from the time I could recognize who a person was. When I was a little boy, she would be going around helping people. Uh, we'd have food in our house where she'd cook a big pot of beans or some kind of stew or something, and she would have little cups and stuff around where she would say, you know, Bobby, I'm filling these little bowls up, so we take it down to different people who are sick, older people who don't have anything, and we were sharing everything.
And y'all were not rich. I
No,
mean, y'all were poor.
absolutely not. I
Yeah.
mean, she was working hard all the time, cleaning people's houses and working, and my grandfather was working, and it was a tough go. And I saw her sharing everything that we had. She would share it.
Right.
People would come to our door and say they don't have any place to stay and they're outdoors and this, that, and the other. And she would make a pallet for them on the floor because we didn't have any real beds.
Yeah.
She put the quilts and stuff down and make a pallet for them to stay in our house overnight so they wouldn't have to be outdoors.
One of her favorite sayings, I understand that she left with you, is you can't go wrong doing right. That was her saying.
That was her saying.
And you decided to make this the title of your autobiography. Talk to me about why. What was the thought process there?
Because from the time I was just a young boy, she would always tell me when she'd send my brother and my older brother and I off to school in the morning. She said, "Now I want you boys to be good boys. And I want you to remember that you can't go wrong doing right. So do the right thing, boys. Do the right thing."
Yeah.
And that's what she would just embed into our heads and our lives about doing the right thing always.
A couple of other sayings that you bring out in the book from your mom. You don't have to be rich to give. That reflects what you were just describing.
That's right.
Another saying, the Lord doesn't make mistakes. and the Lord will take care of the rest if you're having a problem. I mean,
That's
that
right.
was just a lot of wisdom there from Miss Nellie. So I want to show her picture again. So obviously, yeah, I understand she was a gospel singer. She had a
That's right.
big
She had a
voice.
big voice, and people, we would go to different churches all around, all over the place. And she belonged to a choir here in High Point that went around, the Heavenly Gospel
Right.
Singers. And she would always be called on it, whatever church we would go to. And we would visit a lot of churches, and they would call the pastor. I see Miss Nellie Brown in the audience, and I hope she's gonna give us a selection before she leaves here. It was always that kind of thing.
And I understand she was around when you got to experience some of your big success. And I understand we're going to talk a little bit about Richard Nixon later, but you were on Air Force One with President Nixon one time, and you ended up calling your mother on the phone. Do you remember? Do you
Oh,
remember?
oh
Talk to me about what happened there.
Oh yeah. I would be on Air Force One with the president flying to different places, and we were going down to see Billy Graham in Charlotte.
Ah, yes,
And I'm on Air Force One, and I told one of the guys on the plane, I said, now when we get over North Carolina, and I said we're going to fly probably over High Point to get to Charlotte.
right.
And I said, I want to talk to my grandmother. I want to call my grandmother. So I gave him the number, and he said, okay, Mr. Brown, we'll put it through. So when we got near, he he gave me the phone. He said, the phone is ringing now, Mr. Brown. And he punched the button and said, pick up. And I picked up the phone, and my grandmother answered. She said, hello. I
A
said,
big
Mama,
booming voice.
a
Yeah.
big booming voice. I said, Mama, this is Bobby. She said, Bobby, where in the world are you, boy? And I said, I'm flying over High Point right now on the plane with the president on Air Force One. She said, Lord have mercy.
Oh, what a treasure that was. She
Oh,
got to realize you have
oh,
made it. You had
yeah,
really made it. You know, Dr. Brown, while growing up in High Point, you were still very much growing up in a segregated South.
that's exactly right.
You have spent a good part of your life fighting racial hatred, discrimination, and fear. But you talk in the first chapters of your book about the anger this generates, but you also mention that your grandmother kind of helped you rise above that fear. I was wondering if you could talk to me about how did she help you do that?
She always told me, you don't hate anybody, Bobby. You love everybody. She said, even if they're against you, they hate you. Don't worry about that. She said, just make your peace with the Lord and keep on going and treat everybody right. She said, even if they treat you wrong, treat them right anyway. And sometimes I never could understand that too
Right,
much.
right. Now, does your grandmother still speak to you today? I mean, do you think about her just about every day,
I think about her all the
all the
time.
time?
She was the force of my life. I mean, I grew up with her, and she was always trying to keep me and my older brother on the right track.
Right.
When we go to school in the morning, and we'd have a little can, a pot or something
Yeah.
with some food in it because we didn't have any money to get to lunch in the cafeteria. So she sent us to school with a little pot or something and in a bag. And so it was always that way. I mean, and she would be helping other people. She would be taking out food if the people be sick in the community, and somebody told her that Miss Greer's over here sick, or somebody's sick and they're old and don't have anybody. She just be making up food and taking it to them,
Yeah. Yeah. What a life.
feeding
And
them.
what an inspiration and an
She was
example.
she was everything to me.
I want to fast forward just, and we'll go back to your grandmother, and I might mistakenly call her your mother, and I forgive me for that, but she was like a mother to
She
you.
was everything to me.
And in fact, that you call her mama, I might
That's right.
mistakenly refer to her as your mother, and
No,
excuse me if I make that
no,
mistake.
no problem.
But I want to fast forward just a little bit. You ended up graduating from William Penn High School,
Hmm.
in which was the African American high school
That's right.
in High Point. You attended Virginia Union University in Richmond.
Hmm.
You moved back to High Point to take care of your grandmother and your grandfather.
Yeah,
That was a tough decision, I would
they were
imagine.
both ill, and it was. It was tough in a way, but in another way it wasn't because I made up my mind that I'm going to take
You're
care of
going to take
them.
that because they had meant so
They
much to
had
you.
they had been my life.
You enrolled at North Carolina A&T State
Hmm.
University, and you ended up walking from High Point to the A&T campus every day, or hitchhiking, I should say,
Hitchhiking.
hitchhiking.
Yeah,
So
I would go out at on the old Greensboro Road at 5 Points, right at 5 Points,
yes,
and that was the main road to Greensboro.
absolutely.
So I could get out there and I could thumb a ride to Greensboro.
And
All
you
I need to do is get to Greensboro, and I walk to ENT
and you were able to find a ride just about every day.
just about every
I
day.
doubt you could do that now.
No,
No, I doubt people are afraid to pick up
oh
people
no,
now. You just
they would
can't
pick
do
you
that.
up.
You ended up marrying your childhood sweetheart, Sally Walker. You had known her since elementary school or
That's
earlier.
that's elementary school.
That is amazing. You were able
Uh,
to maintain that relationship.
we maintained her. She was my
She
girlfriend
was
in
your
elementary
girlfriend.
school,
Attraction all the way back then.
all the way back
Back
then.
then. You became a High Point police officer, and correct me if I'm wrong, 1956.
Hmm.
And that's an interesting story too, because it was kind of on a whim that you became a High Point police officer, and you didn't know that until an officer came and knocked on your
That's
door.
exactly
Tell me
right.
that story.
I was in at A&T,
Yes,
and what I would do every day is I would get the bus over there and get the bus back. And so the bus would be up on, I think the bus station was on Wren Street or
right,
somewhere up in there. And I'd get off the bus and walk home from Wren Street down to where we lived on Commerce Street.
right,
Uh, and so this particular night, I got off the bus and was walking down Wren Street, and I see all these people, young guys mostly, and mostly white. And I was passing by there, I said, man, what in the world? That's when the guy said, what's going on? They said, oh, they giving examinations for the police department.
ah,
And I said, can anybody take it? They said, anybody who wants to take can take it. And I said, well, I think I'll take that because my sociology class, we were studying about police relationships with
law
the community
enforcement
and
or in
all
the
that.
community. Yeah,
And I said, this would be a great thing. I could write a big paper on this.
right,
So I went in there and asked the fellow, could I take it? And he said, oh, yes, sign up, sign that paper there, and come on in and take the exam. So I went in, I signed the paper, went in and took the exam.
right.
And
You forgot about it. I
I
mean,
forgot all about it,
yeah,
and then I wrote a paper on it for my
right.
sociology class
Hope
at
you got a good
A&T.
grade on it.
I got an A on
Excellent.
it. And so about a week later, I guess it was, uh, I had two detectives that come to my house. And my grandmother asked him, well, what do you want? They say they want to speak to Robert Brown.
Now, keep in
She's,
mind, this was the segregated South at the
oh,
time.
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure your grandmother was probably thinking
Oh,
the
she
worst.
was upset. She
Yeah.
got upset. The police come to our house.
Oh,
Police
yeah.
never came to our house. So she asked him, what do they want with my boy? And they said, well, we just want to talk to him. They said, we want to talk to him about maybe become a policeman. And they say I made the highest grade anybody's made on that test.
Right.
And said, we just want to talk to him.
Yeah.
And so
And he pretty much offered you a job right there and said you could become a police officer.
right there on the spot, I went out on the porch. I didn't go in the house. I went out on the porch to talk to him.
Right.
And They said, you made the highest grade anybody's made on our tests, and we want to offer you a job as a policeman.
Wow.
And I said, well, I'm still in school at A&T. And they said, well, we got this job open. If you want it, it's yours. And you can have it. We'd love to have you as a
And
policeman.
did you take the job? You took the job, I would
I
assume,
took the job.
while you were still a student?
While I was still a student, I kind of, my grandmother didn't want me to quit school and anything.
Right.
She wanted to keep on going to
Oh,
school.
yeah.
But then I went to school the next day, and I decided on my way to school, I'll tell you, when I go back this evening, I got to take that job because we were broke. I mean, we didn't have any money,
Yeah.
and things
You
were
you
very
could have used
difficult.
you used the
And I said,
funds.
I'll go back to school later on, or I'll go to school part time or something.
Well, you had a very distinguished career as a law enforcement. You were with the High Point Police Department for a while. You went on to work for the Federal Bureau of Narcotics in New
Yeah,
York City. A very accomplished career in that. And then in 1961, you and your wife Sally moved back to High Point to start B&C Associates, a public
right.
relations firm. But you got interested in public relations after, correct me if I'm wrong, reading a book in Greenwich Village that really convinced you that you needed to go into public relations. What was in that book that was so convincing?
Well, I was reading about what public relations was all about. That's what
Right.
the book was all about. And I said, this is what I'd like to do in my life. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so I told my late wife,
Sally, yeah.
Sally, I told Sally, I said, this is what I want to do in my life. So, I want to, and she was kind of
I
shocked,
was
of
going to
course.
say, she's like, you want to do what?
And she said, how are you going to do that, Robert? I said, well, I have to quit my job and we'll have to move back to North Carolina. And she said, what are you going to do back there? What are you going to
Right.
do? And I kept telling her, I said, I'll work it out. I said, I'll work hard and I'll, uh, you know, turn over every rock and make sure that I make something out of it.
And that's exactly what you did. In fact,
Hmm.
your public relations specialty early on was helping local businesses address civil rights and other social
That's
challenges.
right, because they were going through a lot of pain, and the big companies like Woolworth and A&P and all them, they were having huge challenges all over the country.
And you mentioned Woolworths, and that was among your first big clients. In fact,
It was,
it was
man.
it was a company that you were very familiar with because everyone knows what happened in 1961, the sit-ins
Right.
at the store here in downtown Greensboro,
That's
and
right.
you were very familiar with the store because of something that happened when you were with your grandmother when you were a child. Correct me, or with the
Mhm.
water fountain. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, we were in that store and we walked in the store and they had these water fountains, right as you walk in the door.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I started drinking the water. And I just turned it up, started drinking the water. And my grandmother looked and said, Bobby, what the world are you doing? I said, Mom, I'm just getting some water. She said, you can't drink that water. I said, why, Mama? She said, that's white water. I said, white water. I didn't I didn't quite
You didn't
understand what he
quite.
talking
Do you
about.
remember how old you were at that time? Ballpark?
I was maybe 7 years
7, 8.
old,
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that, maybe seven
So you
years
walked
old,
up to the
8 years
white
old.
water fountain. Your grandmother realized what was going
Yeah,
on, and she
yeah.
stopped you.
She stopped me. She said, "You can't drink out of that. We can't drink that water out of there." She said, "Here's the water," and there was a fountain over there that said "colored."
Right, right,
And she
and
said,
that's where you went
"That's where I
and
drank the
drank.
water." And I
Now,
never could. That was strange to me. I couldn't understand why people would be drinking out of these different fountains. I said, Mama, ain't that the same water? She said, yeah, it's the same water, Bobby, but God's going to make it right one of these days.
yeah,
But she didn't realize that I was the one who God would be favored to make it right.
That's right. And
Mhm.
we'll fast forward a little more now. After Woolworths became one of your clients, you helped that company transition
The
into.
whole thing.
Yeah, talk. What was your most significant contribution, you think, to Woolworths and how it does business?
Well, first of all, we had to get rid of a lot of those segregationist challenges that Woolworth had. And
Right.
those challenges were all over. They were in Texas, they were in Maryland, they were in South Carolina, Georgia,
High
Florida,
Point and
and
Greensboro as well.
Greensboro, and all over. So there were problems everywhere, and they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do. And I told them, I was just a young fella, but I told them, I said, we need to stick with and do what's right. And I said, this whole thing, at some point in our nation has to go away. I said, we can't maintain a nation like this. It's going away at some point. And they took my word for it. They were guys. Here I am sitting up there in the Woolworth building, was one of the tallest buildings in New York. I'm sitting up there in their boardroom where we had meetings, where they would meet with me,
Right.
with some of the biggest, wealthiest, most powerful guys in business in America. And I'm telling them what was going on and what was going to happen.
And
I
you
said,
help
this thing
them
is
not only hire more African Americans, but you helped facilitate them getting the first African American to sit on their board of directors. Correct me if,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely the whole thing.
And so Dr. Brown's public relations business was really taking off. And it was also during this time that a chance meeting would put him in direct contact with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It would also mark the start of a relationship that would have a big impact on the nation's civil rights movement. Dr. Brown and I will talk about that in part 2 of our discussion, which we'll post and you'll be able to watch on demand right here on MyFox 8 Plus. So until then, thank you so much for watching this edition of Newsmakers, The Road to Success. I'm Neil McNeil, and we'll see you next time.